20 years of intent to throw and swing hard. Selected topics, part 4. Previously, we covered the inverted W. In this section, I'm going to talk about scapular loading. Scapular loading is probably not as well known. Maybe it is, but it's not as talked about as much because people don't perceive scapular loading as being an evil thing, whereas they do with the inverted W. But scapular loading is pretty much resident in any player that throws with reasonable velocity, and the harder you throw, the more evident scapular loading is. Scapular loading, for those who are not familiar with it, and I'm going to back up for a minute, or I'm going to jump ahead actually for a minute here because I want to go to. Sorry, let's do this. This gives an example of scapular loading, and there's actually I'm showing two types of scapular loading. Although scapular loading. One is for throwers, which is the clip on the left-hand side, and the other is for hitters. Hitters engage in scapular loading. Scapular loading has also been mistaken, and significantly more so from hitters than throwers, as counter rotation. There used to be a lot of discussion about counter rotation on hitters, but really what it was is scapular loading. Scapular loading is nothing but abduction away, adduction of the scaps. Adduction meaning pinching away from the center line, and adduction meaning pinching toward the center line. So scapular loading is abduction of the scapula. It's a pinching back type action. Very important, and the key to it is that it doesn't happen in a lazy, slow fashion. It happens because you're going to throw the baseball. Why do we want a scapular load? Here's a quick, short list, important list. Increases range of motion. It's hugely important because if you increase the range of motion, you can generate force over a longer period of time. And again, muscles cannot instantly create force. It takes time to build up force. So if you have some distance that you can move the muscle over while you're trying to create force, it gives it time to generate that force. Preloads the upper torso. Potentiation of muscle. Muscles like to have some stretching associated with when they want to contract in the opposite direction. Aids in creating external rotation. Again, the adduction of the scap, pulling it back together again, accelerates the upper arm toward the center axis of the body, which would then again help lay back the forearm into external rotation. And last but not least is scapular loading is a major component of whipping power. It's all part of this whip handle to body of the whip to the popper of the whip. Some examples of scapular loading. Of course, Strasburg, who's poor Strasburg, he's a poster boy for inverted W, UCL injuries, all of the above, but he's a hard thrower and he scapular loads. And believe it or not, right next to him is Greg Maddux, considered by many as being the finesse, doesn't throw hard pitcher, but when Greg Maddux came up, he was a hard thrower, a very hard thrower for his size. He would typically be 91, 92 miles an hour. Probably the best example of scapular loading, or at least the person that's been used more than anybody else, other than Strasburg probably, has been Randy Johnson. I mean, he's like two huge wings. He's almost able to touch his elbows behind his back when he throws the baseball. And then we have good old Pedro, little guy. Again, scapular loading is very important. You can't throw hard without scapular loading. This is a three-dimensional model simulation of what I consider exemplative of a 100-mile-per-hour delivery. It does all the things that I think need to be done with the body to generate 100-mile-an-hour velocity with good control, because the player or the simulation embodies very good body control. And what I would call optimized mechanics. What I'm going to do is stop this. What I want to demonstrate here is the scapular loading aspect of the delivery with scapular loading. Basically, we're talking about hand separation, hand brake to here. There's scapular loading. What scapular loading is all about is the point where the player has the intent to throw the baseball. So what happens is there's a smooth separation here, and then, oomph, I'm going to throw. I'm going to throw. This is throw. And from that point on, it's continuous. Well, the whole handbrake. Again, this is one of my big things. The delivery is continuous. Any pauses, breaks, it stops the momentum. Then the body has to restart. So not only is it a momentum killer, it's a motor learning or motor control killer in terms of continuity of the delivery. Boom, boom. We'll take another view. I'm going to throw. You can see the arm action. This is also the inverted W right here. And look at how smoothly, there's the loop. See the loop? There's the loop. And then the unfurling of the loop, which is driven by rotation and adduction of the scapula. So hopefully this gives you a better feel for the scapular loading process, and not only just trying to show it to you, but the intent of what's going on with the player. I'm going to throw right here. I'm going to throw, so that it's a dynamic loading process of the upper torso, and then an unloading process of that torso. So again, hopefully this gives you a better feel for what I talk about, or what I mean by scapular loading, and that it's not something that is natural in terms of you're not born with it. It is natural if you're trying. The only natural part of it is if the player has the intent in his mind to throw the baseball. Throw it hard.
The hand drop and get it into his shoulder. That's what, when these old guys did, that's what they were doing. They were getting the momentum going. They were pumping, they were getting the muscles moving, and da-da-da-da-da. We've gotten to a point where we think that's how we should throw a baseball. It's not how we should throw a baseball. That's what's happening. I believe, my personal philosophy is that I want to see pitches big. I totally opposite with my hitting. With hitting, I want to see them learn how to rotate and stay compact first, and then let them spread out. Then with pitches, I want them to learn how to be free and loose and get something, But again, my definition of throwing, part of it is you're trying to generate eccentric, concentric movements in planes of motion that are used to throw a baseball. This plane of motion is not used initially to throw a baseball. Yes, toward the end it is here, but the initial movement is this way, because you're going to come this way. In other words, whatever direction the next segment is going to move in, you want to load it in that opposite direction. So if I'm going to rotate my shoulders this way, I want to load them in the opposite direction, so that I can pull them back together again, or contract, stretch, contract, stretch, contract, stretch, contract. This is all part. 30% of your velocity doesn't come from muscle strength or quickness. It comes from stretch shortening cycle. Being able to stretch and reverse immediately. I can't emphasize, that starts here and works its all. That's what I try to explain. You don't want to get a flat spot in your delivery, because a flat spot, you've just taken the stretch shortening cycle out of the picture. You want to continually load, and unload. Let's see what else we got going on.
There are an infinite number of ways to use the body to throw the ball. But in general, especially at the higher levels, arm action, or how the body generates arm action, can be viewed in what I would consider or describe as 4 different types of categories. There's a slinging arm action. There's the W arm action, in particular either the flat or inverted W. There's long arming, and then there's short arming. This page is my attempt to demonstrate the 4 general categories of arm action. In the slinging arm action is typified by lifting the arm up to the throwing position and then throwing. In this case, the slinging arm action I've shown is what I consider a very good slinging arm action. There's a lot of slingers in Major League Baseball, and there are outfielders who sling as well as, to a certain degree, infielders. Although I think it's slinging is less prevalent for infielders, high-level infielders, because of the types of throws they have to make, like a snap throw, etc. The slinging arm action can generate high velocities. As I said, there was a kid. The first slinger I really saw was, I think his name was Thompson from the Tigers. I put him up on the SETPRO website way back when, and he could throw over 100. I think he was clocked at 103 miles an hour. The inverted W and the inverted W demonstration that I'm showing is Nolan Ryan. By the way, all of these are basically taken off of Nolan Ryan's delivery, but I've adjusted the arm actions. Inverted W is my favorite, John Smoltz, Nolan Ryan. It's because I believe it offers the best combination for velocity, or speed, I should say, location, and movement. The inverted W has more of a snapping type of arm action when you with it type of throwing. That snapping, whipping, there's more of a whipping, a cracking of the whip, I should say, which I think lends itself to developing more overall throwing capability. Long arming, long arming, I think comes into play when players think that the old adage, reaching back to get something on the ball, and long arming comes into play when players focus on throwing the ball with their hand as opposed to throwing with their elbow or lifting with their scaps, or getting into position by elevating their scaps, what I call scapular loading, to throw the ball. Long arming can lead to some significant problems as well as decreased performance. Long arming typified by, again, the hand goes way back, straightens out in the attempt to thinking that getting something extra on the ball. Long arming is fairly common. Short arming, or what is viewed by many as short arming, more of typified by a snap type throw or a catcher type throw. Short arming is becoming, it was interesting a couple of years ago when I did my seminar out in Houston and out in Washington State at the pitchers boot camp. I brought up the issue, we talked about short arming, and even back then, short arming was not viewed as being as bad as it used to be. I don't believe short arming is the optimum way to throw, but there's some very notable short armers. Pryor could be considered kind of a short armor, Mark Pryor, and of course he's had, there's some issues that he's had, but overall, I mean, the way he throws the ball is a very snapping type throw, can be considered quasi short arm. Bartolo Colon, another player who really is classified, in my opinion, as a short armor, throws like a catcher. Again, catching is a position where you would want somebody more to be like a short arm. One of the reasons is the efficiency. If a typical short armer can get the ball up and into position to throw the ball quicker because it's shorter. It's more of a snap type throw. If I had a player who was a short armer, I wouldn't get too upset. I would try to lengthen them out a little bit or get them more toward it. Short arming to me is a precursor to, or is much more amenable to, more of an inverted W type throwing. It's also more amenable to getting good scapular loading. So again, this is my attempt to explain or demonstrate some of the throwing actions or arm actions that you'll encounter, or that you as a coach, you as an instructor will encounter, and also to give you some what I consider either positives or negatives associated with them. To be continued.